Welcome to Unlocking Moves, where we're going to cover the key decision points and pivotal moments that really change the trajectory of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. And I want to hear their real life stories, not just the glory stories, but also the gory stories. Because as I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. Speaking of shit shows, my guest today can regale us with dozens, if not hundreds of them. Strap up for some great stories from Gareth Gallagher. But Gareth, before we dive in, I usually like to hit my guests with an off-the-wall question, something to throw them off balance to kick off the show. But with you, I think I want to do something a little bit different. You game for that?
Yep, totally. Absolutely. I love that idea.
But here's what I want to do with you. I actually want to throw my audience off balance. And I'm going to read a quote from an article that you're recently in about your book, Eventually Gareth. In Eventually Gareth, Gallagher regales the reader with stories of how he discovered a Russian prostitution ring, tracked down a missing presenter who disappeared after a wild night in New Orleans, coaxed a business executive down from a tree in St. Lucia, and juggled the seating arrangements for a doctor who not only brought his wife to an event, but also his mistress. Holy smokes, Gareth. I've got to read your book.
Yeah, there is a lot in there. I think that captures quite a lot of the book, actually, and some of the, stories that, I've encountered in my 25-year career of working in this industry that is driven by excess, The Russian prostitute ring. Wow. Yeah. You know what? One of the stories I think probably still sits with me today. And, that was a particular situation where my addiction obviously was a big part of this, being on this site inspection for a corporate client and being at a hotel where we were doing a visit for taking this hotel over exclusively for an upcoming event. And what was to entail on this site visit was not only our own kind of, tale of destruction with overindulging, as I think I write in the book, in Russian tradition, and too much vodka, but uncovering kind of this, ring of prostitution, as let's call us, spade a spade, and, being caught in the firing line of that because we weren't getting the service that we wanted, and decided to create quite a scene about that and cause merry hell about it, which then led to us being blackmailed by the general manager of the hotel later on, which you'll read about in the book, because we were complaining on such level. And this was a huge piece of business for the hotel. And so it was a particular of importance. And then I tell the story of what happens after the blackmail, how we deal with that. And then what happens when we go back 6 weeks later for this piecemeal breakfast. And so all is there in the book for you to read. And what happens at that breakfast is unbelievable. So I hope that will bring, some real interesting wow moments to people's hearts and souls.
Well, as I said, everybody strap up, buckle up. We're going to have some great stories like that. As you can hear, my guest today is Gareth Gallagher, who's founder and CEO of EVT Media. He's also, he's been an accomplished senior executive and marketing executive in the event space for over 24 years. And he's managed events for some of the biggest names you can imagine. People like presidents, celebrities, Fortune 500 execs, and, as he says, their insatiable VIPs. Gareth Gallagher also wrote a book that's just coming out called Eventually Gareth. The subtitle is The Show Had to Go On. So Gareth, welcome to Unlocking Moves.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here. And thank you for having me on the show today. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the show and telling you more about my story.
If you're just joining us on Unlocking Moves, today's episode is brought to you as usual by Hire Better, the strategic talent partner for growth-minded entrepreneurs everywhere. Well, you've got such a very interesting story. I want to dive into that, but the way I want to cover it is not just asking you questions about your story. What I'd like to do is take a flip it from how I usually do it and talk about your book, because I know your book is really an amalgamation of all of your life stories, especially in your career. Talk about why you wrote the book, and then more behind it so we can learn more about Gareth along the way.
I think it's really interesting having had a 24-year career in this industry. I originally wrote the book because it came after really coming to terms with losing myself in this, a drug and alcohol addiction, and really a epiphany moment that the industry that I worked in played this huge part in that. And I by no means blame the industry, but I'm not, most certainly not stupid that they so much more could have taken place. And, there is a lack of support in our industry. And so I started to write this book because, having, been in recovery now for almost 6 years and around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous since I was 27, and in therapy for even longer than that, I understand why I have had some of the issues that I've had, and how the industry has really not performed well to really be, promoting some of those issues around food and alcohol and being away from home and family. And so I wrote this book as to be a force for change, and to really showcase, I think an industry that by far is about bringing people together, which is a joyful experience. But at what cost are we doing that? And I don't mean cost as in the dollar or the pound or the euro. I'm talking about the cost of people's lives. And so my aim with this book is for it to be a force for change, to shine a light on the darkness of things that need to change, and to give power back to people that work in an industry that's driven by excess. And I guess in a way I am calling shame on this industry. I am saying that this is not right. Yet you could phrase it in whatever way you want, whistleblowing, calling bluff, whatever. But the whole point of what I'm doing is to enable people to not go through the things that I've gone through in my almost 25-year career.
So let's dig into that a little bit, because as I understand it, the events industry, especially the high-end, high-dollar, big-name, celebrity type of events, is one of, if not the most stressful job that you can imagine. You're putting on a multi-million-dollar event, weddings of two famous people. You've got everybody who is screaming and demanding that things are perfect. They're probably in your face telling you, all the things you're doing wrong, consistently, and you've got to deliver. If you don't deliver, it's an epic failure. And even if you do deliver, you're going to piss them off. So it's high stress. And so is that what leads to the alcohol and drug addiction, because you're trying to cope with that kind of stress? Or tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think from my experience, it definitely was. But I also think that it was something that's very societal, as well, that, we tend to use it as a coping mechanism, because I think anybody, when we do anything, too much of anything in life, it's some form of coping mechanism to cover up some form of trauma or pain or something that we're going through. In my case, in this industry, having gone back and looked at it, I know that I excelled in this industry because, I went into an industry where I got such admiration from completing something that was so impossible. In fact, turning the impossible into the possible, and doing it in radically dangerous situations. I've been in bombs, I've been in earthquakes, I've been stuck in basements in cyclones for hours with clients, and to be able to form under that level of stress has shown that, this is one of the most stressful industries that we work in. And the coordination of that, it's not just the people and the requests that come in, it is also that we are so reliant on so many moving parts, and that is the factor, whether it's, trains, planes and automobiles through to catering, stage, production, it's overwhelming in what we are expected to do. And that's why in Forbes, it's voted in the top 5 most stressful jobs in the world, alongside a first line provider, somebody who's coming to a situation in crisis, and above a CEO of a major banking institution. So I think that gives you a very good indication of why. And for me, drugs and alcohol became by sure a coping mechanism. And I think it became even more of a coping mechanism for me when I became an entrepreneur. Before that, when I was working for an agency, it was kind of like, Friday afternoon, we start at the pub at 12 o'clock. And then, Friday becomes Thursday and Thursday becomes Monday. And, and before you know it, you've grown up in an industry. When I first started in this industry, and I'm probably showing my age now, we went out to lunch with a client and we saw, there was no such things as contracts. It was, a bottle of champagne, a boozy lunch, and 4 hours later you had signed a $250,000 deal and off you went, like the way it got done. And so I was in an industry that was driven by excess. It was accepted, and not only was accepted, it was, and I hate to say this because I love very many of the people that I've worked with, and I love, the career that I've had through those people and how they've shown me the ropes. But like us all, they were promoting that way of life, and it became a normality rather than a dysfunction.
I can imagine that if I'm trying to deliver for an event with a big name person who's got these high expectations that are unrealistic and expecting the purple unicorn, I think I might drive me to excess as well to deal with those dysfunctional and crazy clients. That's for sure. Hey, I want to dive into one of those comments I made earlier in the beginning. Was some of the stories. Share with me the story about the presenter who went missing in New Orleans. I'm assuming they got drunk or something and went off in the wild streets of New Orleans. And why the hell were you the person that had to go track him down?
Well, I think it happened to be an event I was running, and I specialize and have specialized for many, many years. In fact, probably 80% of my career in medical. And, when doctors go away, they like to play. It's as simple as that. But, I think actually when anybody goes away and they're away from their home ground or their institution, they like to play. So, this particular event, we were running a congress for a number of doctors, and it was hosted by our client at the time. And we were running this event in New Orleans. I think I'd done in this 1 year about 8 or 9 of these events. And we had a doctor, we'd done the usual, these events were cookie cutter. They weren't stressful. Doctors were all flown business class, sometimes first class. They were put up in the best hotels. They'd go to the convention during the day, and we would do dinners at night. And then maybe there would be an option for doing other things during that time. Now, during that time, we would have done things, activities, etc. Now, not so, that would never happen. But this particular occasion, we went out to dinner. It was it was me and my colleague. We started at the very famous Pat O'Brien's, and I actually had to go and take a load of people back to the hotel. It was walking distance. I'd been gone like 15, 20 minutes. And when I came back, it's like this group had just, they'd had an extra hurricane, which is this very famous drink there. And they'd gone, it just was like that flick of a switch. And people just,
one drink too many.
In there, one too many, we all go over. And we left that evening and people parted and went off different ways. And that was just the way it was. Come the following morning at 5:30 a.m. when, it's, we're with the client, and it's where's Dr. So-and-so who's speaking at a symposium at 8 o'clock in the morning, breakfast symposium. Well, with them, we had to retrace our steps as to where that person may be. We knew that they weren't in the hotel, and we thought very strong. We had very strong inclination, or intuition, should I say. For the those that know me, know that I've studied the planets and mysticism for a very long time, and so highly intuitive. We knew that he was still out, and so we scoured the streets of New Orleans looking for the reminiscence and backtracking, really, because we'd done multiple places after that. And there we were. There we got to this one bar to, I found him on this bar out the back. So there I was walking these streets of New Orleans, backtracking to find this doctor that was presenting at 8 a.m. And I walked into one of these bars that we happened to pass during our way home from the supper, from dinner. And there he was, dancing on tables.
At 5:30 in the morning?
Yes, with these ladies. And so I obviously had to go over to him, and, kind of crisis management on that situation, pay off the ladies who were very upset that he was leaving, as was the bar. and called my colleague to get, to advise him that I'd found him and to get his room ready. By that stage, we had his room key so we could get him back to the hotel. We got him into the car, back to the hotel, literally into the room, pushed him in the shower, throw a cold shower on him, some coffee down his throat. And he went to that symposium like nothing happened. And, but this is where I think people illusion of what happens event or lack of education is. We've all been there and done that, and I remember saying to myself, I will never be that guy that had so much worry over 3 people, 5 people running around the city, for that, and that cause of that chaos. Like, we need to find a backup presenter. We need to get somebody ready that can deliver the medical content of this symposia. And I said to myself, I'd never be that guy, but I became that guy. I became that guy. And I talk about that in the book through my addiction. So yeah, that's a story that, and there's even more funny anecdotes and stories in the book about that as well.
I want to ask you a follow-up. You shared with me this whole concept of one of the big deals with this industry is debauchery and the glitz and glamour of the industry and how it's really not what it's perceived. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And maybe you covered a little bit with this doctor story, but what other stories can you share with us about the debauchery industry?
Yeah, I mean, the industry, I think, as a whole is I would say, is an industry driven by excess, and that's everything from corporates through to individual clients, through to, when people are coming together, it's generally a social environment. There's generally alcohol involved and food, and often or not, the food can be, not consumed, depending on the audience level. And so it can be excesses taken, and unfortunately, in those environments when we're away from home or we're doing something as social, we have a tendency to overindulge, I think, as human beings. And as an industry, I think we have done that very much over the year and promoted it. And I know over the years, many corporates have now changed their RSI policies around allowing alcohol at events and how their employees or even, them themselves consume alcohol, because there is a duty of care there, especially if you're in foreign destinations. But that's come after, many, many decades of this excess of going out there. And you talked about the story of the CEO in the tree in this event that I was running. I'm in the Caribbean, again, that event was all about, let's plow them with as much booze as possible, make them have a great time. So they think the company's amazing. So they just want to get on that event next year because they know they're going to have the party of a lifetime, and therefore it will encourage them to do their sales. It's not the most motivational way in today's climate to be doing that. But, I think also as an industry, we don't recognize what level of pressure. I mean, over the years, I've missed family weddings, funerals. I've missed even points in my own career and my own life where I have personally had to forego, those kind of circumstances to deliver, missed out on opportunities because my service above self mentality was always at the forefront, which was something that I inherently learned in the industry. We still find value in carpeting floors, that's not, it's the value of that the carpet on the floor is irrelevant. You can make that stage look as amazing and beautiful as you want. And yes, it can be on brand and it can be, but if what doesn't come from that stage is a message that relates to the audience, then your job is not done. And that for me is where the industry is desperate for change, to move away from this promotion of let's bring people together, throw a party, have a great time, through to, I always say my measurement of a success of an event is never getting everybody there. It's how you make them feel when they walk away. Not any one session, it's how they feel when they walk away. And that's everything. But I think debauchery is, something that is overdone in every area, and I talk about this all the time when I'm asked to do an upfront session. I say, guys, if you were going on a plane, you're at the airport with your family, and you are at the, you're at the airport, you sit down in the restaurant, you're having a family meal, and in comes this pilot. He sits down, sat there with a bottle of wine, has another, you get chatting to him, and then you find out he's your pilot of your plane. You're not going to get on that flight, or you're going to do something about it. So why, as an industry, do we still feel it's okay to allow our teams that are rigging stages and sets to be intoxicated or partying, for want of a better word, or allowing them to participate in that, when we, just as much as a pilot, have hundreds of thousands of people, health and safety at our concern? It bothers me to this day that so many plant planners are so naive to that and to basic business acumen with things like insurances. I could honestly say to you, if we were to do a poll, and we've done it over the year, probably 6 out of 10 event planners have inadequate insurance running their events. And we will be, there's a recent article coming out for me, particularly around what happens with a duty of care when somebody dies on your event.
Wow. Now count me in the number of naive people who didn't realize that my event planners were getting drunk and getting stoned, on set, and that I might not be insured properly. So you opened my eyes for sure. Gareth, I want to shift gears. The title of the show is Unlocking Moves, where we talk about the key pivotal moments or decision points that really change the trajectory of entrepreneurs and leaders. I'd like to talk a little bit about what yours might have been.
Yeah, absolutely. I worked in a few agencies when I started my career, and the majority within one agency where I traveled to the US, which has been my home for a very long time. And then I went out to Asia, the UK and China. And it was really, my unlocking move really was a rock bottom I experienced at the back end of that, being so exhausted, being in a country managing 3 offices, 50 to 60 people that I was managing, daily reports, and really thinking to myself and overindulging in my addiction with drugs and alcohol. It was when I had that rock bottom, did I realize that the love that I got from my clients more than I got from the company I worked for. And that's a sad thing to say, but that is the truth. That is the reality. Made me realize that I was doing this people by people. And that has been my kind of ethos over the years. And that was the moment that I was like, this is the time for me to do something myself. I was gifted, very gifted. I went to consult for a client and they said, why don't you start your own thing? And it was scary as hell. And that's what happened. I started my own thing and it grew from there, and then I happened to meet other major clients on trade shows. And it was just like this unlocking move of like, I've been trapped in my reality of working for this agency for such a long time. I was at a glass ceiling. I was at the top of my aspiration there anyway. My next move, I believe, was to go out and venture into my own, because I have big ideas. I'm a visionary. I'm a creative. And that's going to come up with some of my upcoming projects, which I'm so excited about. And I needed to get out of that day-to-day grind. And I am a risk taker. There's clearly, after my career of being in so many bombs and earthquakes and crazy events and things, it's clearly that I'm okay with risk. That became my unlocking move. And it's interesting because looking back, my great-great-grandfather used to be, because I was, there was many years where I kept saying, why me? Why me? Why did I end up in these, these situations where I'd have thousands of people under my own command? When bomb goes off opposite your hotel, or you're trapped in a basement, or you're in these circumstances, you do ask that question, why me? And I know that I was given the strength to deal with it, and I had the skill set over the years. But where I was going with that is like, my great grandfather was a man that when war was about to happen and the sirens went off in the cities, he was one of those very few people that was part of bringing people to shelter and getting them into the war, the bunkers and things to protect them. And so it's no question why I would happen to be dealing with, such, radically dangerous situations throughout my career.
Wow. So you were able to take a very bottom part of your career and shift your mindset to make it your own and become an entrepreneur out of it, which is not too dissimilar from a lot of other entrepreneurs. They become entrepreneurs because they've hit rock bottom. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, you're welcome.
Hey, Gareth, I like to consider myself the listener's advocate. And if I've got this opportunity to ask Gareth any question that I've got, and so let me ask you this. I want to talk a little bit about rock bottom, but a different rock bottom that I know you talk about in your book. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the really the moments when you hit rock bottom personally, not necessarily with your career as you just talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And they kind of intersect. There's no question about that. And it was, I was at a part in my career where we'd moved from Asia into the US. We were very successful. We'd gone from running, I think, 15 events a month to, 115 a month. So we grew very, very quickly, and it was just me. And I was a very naive, very arrogant, entrepreneur, but I always surrounded myself with the areas that I knew that were not my skill set, legal, finance, HR. And so, but with that level of pressure of growing a company, being very successful in the US, running some of the biggest events for some of the biggest clients in the world, being under that pressure, I was really in the height of my addiction. And, drugs and alcohol became a necessity rather than, something that you do recreationally or socially. And there is a difference between the three of those. And I urge anyone that is struggling with that to either reach out to me or to reach out to an anonymous program, because there is a lot of help out there. And, for me at that point, I was running on so much. I was high functioning. There's no question about it. I had over 100 people in my team. I was running multiple offices, and we were running hundreds of events. And slowly but surely, I was unable to show up, because that was taking over. And when you stop showing up, so do others. You stop putting in, others stop believing in you, and rightly so, pull away, whether that's an employee, a client, a supplier. And so that happened slowly but surely to the point where I was left with an eggshell of a business, and also more so an eggshell of myself. And when I really gave up the ghost after a long, long time of battling, I knew I couldn't go on. And I share many stories in the books of how I got to that, and being told by doctors, if I didn't stop drinking, my life expectancy was very small. And I knew where members of my family have gone. I knew where my friends, others had gone, partners had gone. So, I knew I had to stop. And when I stopped, it was like my entire world collapsed. It collapsed professionally, and it collapsed personally. And you know what? It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was like, I was taken to the bare. It's like being reborn as a child, where you're naked and you have nothing but an experience that is where you've got to put yourself back into being a student. And I believe that we are students of life. We know very little. We think we know a lot, but actually in reality, we know absolutely little. And I believe that every day is a gift, and every challenge is an opportunity for growth. And, and here's the thing with me, some of the most painful experiences in my life have come through absolute humiliation, losing clients and losing offices, and I will never forget, New York is not a place you want to upset people. I remember being turfed out of our office in New York, and a landlord pissed off to the point where they threw all of our stuff on the street, and the humiliation of experience that got. But I talk that my experience of humiliation, I say it was a humbling experience, masters humiliation. And the biggest lessons we go through in life are painful, but the pain for me, there's purpose in the pain. And when there's pain, there's the biggest amount of growth that we can go on through. And when we can get in front of the things that are so uncomfortable and do the things that are, I always think to myself, if I don't want to do it, that's when I need to do it, because it's the reality of it. And what's come from that is my new stage, my new show, as I talk about in the book, because it is the show had to go on until it couldn't. And I've gone through a huge amount of loss in my life, and not just me, but others that have been around me. And I think that's made me into the person that's enabled me now to realize that we all have a story and we're all carrying pain. And maybe it's just my choice in this lifetime that I've had an opportunity to deal with it. And maybe others are at the end of their skill set and you've just had yours extended,
Wow.
and that I feel blessed for that.
That's powerful, Gareth. What I heard was there's purpose in the pain. If it's hard to do, that means I should do it. I think that's the quote that you said. And then there was another point in there where you basically said that the challenges are really what made you who you are along the way, and you wouldn't be where you are or who you are without them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the getting uncomfortable, being comfortable with getting uncomfortable. I would say that to any entrepreneur. You will have to make decisions that will be so uncomfortable, but it is the nature of the beast of what we do, and that's the gift of this journey that we live on. And entrepreneurs, we forget how gifted we are. We forget that we are here to build things for other people. And I only had a conversation today. Somebody was criticizing me about, oh, you're on vacation, you got a call and blah, 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 but the reality is what I'm doing today is to build for the people of tomorrow. It takes an entrepreneur like us that's got that get up and go and drive to be able to do that. And I celebrate them all.
Well, we celebrate entrepreneurs here as well. So we'll join you in your celebration. So I've got one more question for you before we go, and that is a trick question. But what is one question that no one ever asks you and you kind of wish they would, or maybe you're secretly glad that they don't ask you?
Well, I think, if it's professional, I think you can read all those stories that are coming out now. There's a lot of press coverage about who I've worked with and what those types of individuals are about. I think on a personal level, I think the question that people never seem to ask me, but always seem to think it is, is rehab part of my story? Absolutely, it is. It was a bit more glorified, rehab, but it was part of my story. And do I see myself having another drink? Just for today, I do not, but I cannot tell you what tomorrow will bring. And if I'm living in yesterday, then I'm not living in present. And the only way to stay present is to practice prayer, is to practice meditation, and whatever else that is in your toolbox of things that make you grounded and bring you back to who you are as an individual. So I do believe that and from a professional level, I think, there's nothing I haven't shared in the book. That I'm a pretty open guy now, and I'm like, bring it on. I've had some very uncomfortable interviews with tabloids, and some very uncomfortable things written about said interviews and myself. But I think there's always purpose in the pain.
Gareth, where can we find more information about you or EVT Media, or perhaps The Show Must Go On?
Yeah, you can purchase the book online. It's on pre-order on Amazon. You can get your copies now from BookBaby or from Barnes & Noble online. They're in Barnes & Noble stores nationally here in the US, which is incredible. And for EVT Media, you can check out our website, evtmedia.org, and you can reference our LinkedIn account or register a request through the business. And I am launching some new projects. There's a lot more coming out, in the next coming weeks. Keep an eye on my latest projects that we will be bringing, and you will read about in the press in the coming weeks.
Man, I'm excited about your new projects, if they're anything like the projects that you've had in the past. So on that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. Please like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you consume your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, what have you. Please give us a 5-star review. That keeps us going. And Gareth, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I know you've inspired thousands with your authenticity and your amazing stories.
No, thank you for having me on the show. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to following you guys more and hearing more.
If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmike.com/quiz.